Anyone but her. Once again, I left the courtroom free man. Though my fury was waning, my heart felt heavy. I was surprised that this time, I hadn't been screwed over too terribly. I made my way to my old, reliable pickup in the public parking lot. I had to get on the road because I had a 40-mile commute home. I needed to be there for my children when they got home from school. Although their mother had passed away, I thought that I should spend as much time as possible with them. My neighbor woman took care of them when I was busy. For some reason, I approached the entrance opposite the police station and went inside the small hole in the wall pub. The customers turned to stare at me, and the noise level dropped several dB. I knew I was out of place. I could tell that every individual inside had either a badge or a law enforcement uniform someplace on them. Naturally, they were all armed as well. I paused to allow my eyes to acclimate to the darkness after the intense mid-August sunlight. I felt the freezing air envelop me, and I nearly let out a loud groan. Not a breath of wind had been present. Only a little portion of the sweat that had been on my shirt throughout my walk out of the courtroom had evaporated. In addition to being overheated, I had been perspiring from anxiety in the courtroom. I was certain that my body stench was too overt. Through so much smoke you could cut it with a knife, I made my way to the bar. The clientele still smoked like chimneys, even in this day and age of health consciousness. More than anything, it was a stress relief for them, and they didn't seem to mind if it made it harder for them to go after criminals. I looked around the room one more time and sat down at the bar. The bartender gave me a brief glance before approaching me. She arched an eyebrow at me as she stood there and said nothing. I could tell from her quiet that I wasn't welcome there. I observed the bartender pivot and stroll towards the coolers situated at the center of the bar. After a little search, she removed the bottle from the rear. After popping the cap, she turned to face me again. When she set the bottle down in front of me on the bar, it pounded loudly. "That'll be $4.75. I cautiously placed the bottle back down after giving it a good tug. I had not tasted a colder beer in a week, damn it. Leo's claim to fame, of course, was their guarantee of the county's coldest beer. The cooler was maintained at 30 degrees Fahrenheit. I took out my wallet by reaching inside my pocket. I dropped a $5 that I had found on the bar in front of the waiter. She picked up the bill and proceeded toward the cash register, but once again, no one spoke. I observed her swaying within her tattered jeans. Her cheeks bounced around in her jeans like two raccoons in a burlap sack as she walked away, practically waddling. For as long as I had known about Leo's, Cora had been working behind the bar. She became the sole full-time employee and owner following the death of her husband, Leo. My 25 cents in change was slapped onto the bar in front of me without a word. She turned again and waddled out of sight. I had already consumed over 2/3 of my Dos Equis by this point. I was being studiously ignored by the bartender. If I asked for another beer, would I really get one? I observed the other customers resuming their interrupted talks in the rear bar mirror. Again, the volume of noise rose. When a group at one of the tables chose to depart, I might have had 1 or 2 more swallows of beer left. As they passed me on their way to the door, 2 of the customers fixed their gazes on me. The third cop, a plainclothesman, pulled up next to me and said, "Dean, it's been a long time. Why did you come back?" Gazing up at the large man, I pondered whether I could defeat him once more. I wanted to try even after all these years. He appeared considerably softer, and I was in better shape than I had been in years. Though I truly didn't want to attempt, I felt like I could take him. Neither of us had a happy ending to the previous encounter. I allowed the tension to leave my body and allowed myself to relax. After I laughed, I said, "Stupid I guess, Sean. Just got out of court and decided to get a brew before I headed home. No law against it, is there? I just had my 3rd strike and got rid of another cheating skank. I needed a brew before I headed on back home." "No, I suppose legally you can drink anywhere you're man enough to, but you make a lot of people nervous." Sean grinned at me. "Would you mind going somewhere else to have a drink? You'll feel more at home somewhere you don't disturb the other patrons. You are a loser, and none of us want you here. It hurts our reputation to be associated with a loser who can't keep his women happy and prevent them from cheating on him." "Oh, I will, hell, I have," I chuckled. "I know better than to join my old buddies here for a drink. What fear do some of them harbor that I will continue to pursue them? Or did a few of them also mistreat Paula? Tell them I don't give a damn if they did. I took a lesson from you when you mistreated Terry. Are you still with the skank who cheats?" I was surprised their marriage had lasted the 7 years it had. I had only been married to the skank 18 months before she cheated on me and I threw her to the curb. I wondered why Sean didn't do the same thing. I guess some guys just don't give a damn about things like that. Sean tensed and leaned toward me. I knew he was still married to my ex. I also knew things were not all roses in their household. They were both screwing around and had separated several times before getting back together. After learning that Sean had been cheating on my first wife, I took matters into my own hands. For several nights while I was on duty, I drove out of my patrol area until I finally saw what I expected, Sean's car parked in the street near my house. I pulled into my driveway and entered my home, where Sean and Terry were cuddling after a loving session. The only thing that kept me out of jail at that particular time were the hidden video cameras that covered the living room and bedroom. I slammed the door back as I entered the bedroom, causing it to bounce back, startling the sleepy couple into a frenzy. I then entered the bedroom and stood at the foot of the bed, staring at my soon-to-be ex-wife and ex-friend. Terry cried out in fear as she saw me glaring at her, cowering back against the headboard of the bed and pulling the sheet up to her chin. I knew exactly what buttons to push when Sean jumped off the bed and started to come toward me, and as soon as he stood up, I started verbally abusing him, telling him to get his ass out of my house and that I was going to his house to tell his wife what I had seen him doing. I also carried my cell phone with me, taking pictures during our confrontation, just in case the video camera malfunctioned. Sean slammed into me with such an oath that he knocked the cell phone out of my hands. When I tore into him, he pulled back to hit me again. I kicked him in the balls, then slammed my knee up in his face as he bent forward, pushing his head down into my knee as it came up, and he fell to the ground unconscious. I kicked him again for good measure when I walked past him. You can guess where I kicked him. I was going to have a video of the little tryst, so I didn't worry too much about the cameras I had set up in my home feeding into a computer in my locked office. I told Terry to leave the house before I got off duty, picked up my phone, and walked from the room, out of the house, and back to my cruiser. I went straight to Sean's home. It was almost 3 in the morning when I rang the doorbell at the Michaels residence. A very sleepy-looking wife answered the door, and when she saw me standing there in uniform, "Yes, Sean, but not in the same way that you fear Mrs. Michaels. I just got home and discovered him sharing a bed with my spouse. If you'd like, I can send you some photos." "No, that is not possible. This evening, he is expected to be at the station. He is the watch's sergeant." "No, Mrs. Michaels, I'm afraid you've been duped. Today was his day off. Sergeant of the watch Jackson is. Do you want me to email the images to you now? Give me your email address if you do, and I'll send them your way in a day or two." "Not at all. You don't have my trust. Sean wouldn't treat me that way." "Indeed, he would. Here you see." I showed her a few of the photos on my phone, and she broke down in tears on the ground. I felt horrible for her, but I also felt good about giving Sean additional grief. I turned my back on the sobbing woman, grinned to myself, and headed back to my cruiser to continue my patrol. The Michaels and Terry had told the lieutenant that they had called him for help because they thought there was an intruder in our home. But I had supposedly been coming home for a little loving when I saw Sean in the house and went crazy accusing them of cheating on me and attacking him. About 30 minutes after I left the Michaels home, I was called back to the station, where I was removed from duty and placed on suspension without pay. Naturally, I used the footage I had taken from my home to refute the accusations made against me for attacking Sean. Those images prevented me from going to jail for attacking Sean, and they also cost him a brief suspension from the force and a drop back to the ranks. No, Sean had good reason to despise me, even though I felt completely justified in what I had done to him. Well, that marriage went to hell, and with it, my career. I was fired for my crimes, and Terry took me to the cleaners. I lost the house and half of our savings, and I was forced to pay support to Terry, which fortunately ended in less than a year when she married Sean after his divorce was finalized. Sean detested me, his fists clenching as he wanted to hit me, and I almost wished he wouldn't. It was his move, so I scowled at Sean and waited. Eventually, he grinned and said, "Yeah, Terry and I are still married, Guy. Thank you, but no. I am aware that you are the one who continues to provide us with the damning images. How about giving up and leaving us alone?" He chuckled and went on, "Or not. Hell, you might even be helping me. She's seen so many of the photos you sent and heard so many times that I'm a cheating guy that she wouldn't believe me if I cheated on her. Although you have given me some issues, I must acknowledge that you have also benefited me." I nearly told him that I wasn't the one taking the pictures and sending them to him and Terry. I had been shooting some of Sean one night when another officer noticed me. He and some of his brother officers liked what I had done and started doing it too. There were a lot of officers that despised Sean for various reasons. Some of them shared my hatred for him because they were ruining his and Terry's lives. I also didn't tell him that I had only sent one set of pictures. I wasn't following him or her and never had been. The one picture I had sent was simply an accident. I had seen him with another woman in a bar shortly after my divorce from Terry. Sean turned and strode out the door, causing me to squint as the sunlight streamed through. Just as Sean was leaving, one of my last surviving law enforcement friends entered, smiling, as she saw me sitting at the bar. Jackie and I had attended the police academy together, and she had joined the sheriff's department when I joined the city police force. She slid across the floor and took the stool next to me. "Usual?" inquired our reticent bartender, glancing up at Jackie. With a nod of her head, Jackie gestured to my Dos Equis bottle and raised 2 fingers, and in a matter of seconds, a drink was placed in front of each of us. Jackie gave our host a 10 and waved her off. After taking multiple sips of our beer, Jackie turned to face me in the bar mirror and said, "I was in the courthouse earlier. In family court, I saw you. Learned of Paula. Oh, Dean, you really can't choose them, can you? Is it 3 now?" I nodded assent with a sigh and replied, "Yeah, you know it is." Terry and Sean got things started. That one took all of 18 months, hell. And there was Susie, the child's mother. Well, she survived nearly 5 years at least before I found her with her school's damn football coach. But Patty definitely caught me off guard. God, I had a sneaking suspicion that she was cheating on me after just 9 months of marriage. I suppose I should have anticipated that outcome. Oh no, I knew how because I was an officer. I rushed on, sorry Jackie. I noticed her face stiffen as I glanced at her. It was not wise of me to go there. Hell, I guess I'm just resentful. I didn't imply that all the ladies on the force were like that. For crying out loud, she was a friggin' dispatcher. Oh my God, I have no idea what I mean. Horrible. Jackie put her delicate tiny hand on my forearm and grinned, saying, I know Dean. Hell, it's nearly a workplace hazard. We're all tempted because there's so much tension and testosterone in the air. Some of us simply lack the strength of character to resist temptation and return home in time for our release. Yes, anything. However, I see that Ed and you have resisted the urge. Why couldn't Patty or Sean, for that matter, do it if you guys and a few others could? Hell, Dean, you've known from your days on the force. Some people are merely helpless. Some, like Sean, are habitual mistresses. She shook her head and added, that's one I'll never be able to figure out. Now cheer up, drink your beer, and get home to those kids. It still amazes me that Susie left those adorable kids with you to go on a job overseas. How could a mother, hell, how could any parent, just up and abandon their kids in that way? Though I don't know Jackie, I'm quite happy that she did. I genuinely believed that she would remain in this country or attempt to take them even after the court denied her request to leave the country. Having them at home is wonderful. This year, little Howard completed kindergarten, and Stacy was enrolled in first grade. They still find everything thrilling and novel, and they have such a strong enthusiasm for life. If she'd stayed here and maintained primary control of children, I would have lost my mind. Even though it can be difficult at times to provide for their needs, I wouldn't change a thing for love or money. At the same time, Jackie and I drank our beers, and for a while we just sat and enjoyed each other's company. Eventually, Jackie sighed and got up to go, saying, I guess I should go. We had both parked in the same lot, so we chatted as we walked to our cars. I still have to fix supper for Ed, get some laundry done, then get to bed in time to be fresh as a daisy for the morning shift, I said, following her out of the dim bar and into the bright light and heat of another August afternoon in southwest Missouri. While driving home, I contemplated my previous romantic misstep. Fortunately, this time, I had the foresight to obtain a prenuptial agreement from Patty. We parted ways with the meager assets we had amassed during the brief period of our marriage. I had been managing the family farm during my second marriage, but I didn't own it, so I was only obliged to divide bank accounts with Susie. This had angered her greatly because she believed that my mother had given me the farm when Dad passed away. In reality, Susie had only transferred the operation to me, and since Mom had referred to it as my farm, she assumed that meant I was the owner of the land, machinery, and livestock. The farm was small, only about 2 sections, but I made a pretty good living off of it. In fact, I made more money there than I would have as a patrolman if I hadn't lost my job. On top of that, I enjoyed the work and freedom much more. Some days I could just say screw it and goof off. Life was hard, but I loved it on the farm. Mom passed away soon after Crystal and I divorced, and I took over the farm at that point. I arrived home about 45 minutes after leaving Joplin. My 2 children and their sitter were in the backyard, where the children were playing in their small wading pool and Tammy was reading and watching them from the picnic table. Howard trailed behind the children slowly, but I hugged both of them and went to the kitchen for another beer. Hey Dean, I came out and sat at the table across from Tammy. Is everything finished now? Yes, Tam, I'm leaving the ballgame now. I had just experienced strike 3 in the bottom of the 9th inning. I sat looking out over the brown dry grass in the yard, and through the trees that lined the stream bank. I could barely see the small stream that separated my yard from the south field. I let my thoughts stray to a more pressing issue than the end of my 3rd marriage. I had to start feeding my cattle hay almost 3 weeks earlier, and I was concerned that if it didn't rain soon, I wouldn't have enough to get through the winter. It was predicted to get much worse before it got better. News reports said this was the worst drought in 65 years, and cornfields that normally yielded between 150 and 200 bushels per acre had already been chopped for silage because the grain was so poor it wasn't worth letting it mature to combine. Other crops were suffering equally from the lack of water. Many farmers were already selling cattle they would not normally sell because they could not feed them. I could pump water from the stream that ran through my farm to irrigate some of my grassland, so at least I was able to survive thanks to my crop insurance. Trying to force a smile, I turned to face Tammy, who was observing me, and said, well, guess I can watch the kids for the rest of the day, Tam. Why don't you go home already? Though I doubt I'll need you tomorrow, I'll give you a call anyhow. Soon after school started, Tammy came to see me. Dean, I'm afraid I won't be able to watch the kids after school much this year, Tammy said. That fall, Stacy was in the 2nd grade and Howard was in the 1st. For Jack and me, things are simply not getting any better. Jack currently works part-time at the feed mill, but if I can't find a full-time job in town to help out, we will lose the farm. I'm sorry, but I have to leave you. All I need is more cash to help us get through this terrible drought. I'll keep an eye on them until I land a job or until you find someone else, but you really ought to start looking for someone right away. I can still care the kids if you still want me to, and we can arrange it around my work schedule. Shit, Tam. I regret learning that. I'm not sure what I can do, but please let me know if there is anything I can do to help you and Jack. I'm sorry to see you go. The children adore you greatly. Are you aware of any helpful people? No, not straight away, but I'll keep a watch on things. Apologies. One evening in early October, after I had returned from the field, Tammy stayed to speak with me. Dean, have you found a sitter yet? No, I did find one old woman in town that would be willing to watch them part-time, but I can't find anyone who wants to come out here and watch the kids in our house. Most of them aren't willing to stay late the nights I am still working in the fields, or they want a guaranteed full-time job. Why? Did you finally find work? Well, sort of. I got hired at Walmart for the Christmas season. They said I might get to stay on full-time after if things work out. I'm supposed to start next week. Sorry. Through the holidays and into early March, I was able to cover my child care needs thanks to Tammy, the elderly woman in town, and the wives of a few friends. But I was finding it difficult to balance the helpers. A few of them refused to sit with the children on the farm. I had to leave what I was doing to go drop the kids off at the sitter in the afternoon because some of them didn't have a way to get home or be picked up. When I was done working, I would then have to go pick them up. That was pretty late at times. Sometimes, none of the sitters would have the kids at their house late at night, so I had to leave work before I was ready to. I was in the shop fixing some gear at the beginning of March when I heard a car pull in. After moving to a spot where I could view the driveway, I noticed a sheriff's car parked there. As I turned to face the house, I noticed Jackie making her way back to her vehicle. I laughed and said, "Hi Jackie, what brings you out here into the boonies? Did they finally find the body where I left it?" "Not funny, Dean. Dean, I've got a little problem and I thought you might be able to help me solve it. Have you found someone to watch your kids yet?" "Well, sort of. I have half a dozen people who watch them some of the time. I have to miss a lot of work hauling them around, and sometimes I have to stop working before I'm ready so I can pick them up at night. I still haven't found anyone who can be on call all the time and watch them here at the house." "Why?" Jackie looked ashamed and replied, "Well, that dumb sister of mine is just about as poor a picker of husbands as you are of wives. She caught her husband cheating on her 2-3 weeks ago and kicked him out. She filed for divorce and needs work. This is the second husband she's caught cheating on her. She had been a stay-at-home mom, and you know how the job market is right now. She thinks she's going to lose the house too. They've been renting, you know. Anyway, Jack and I told her they could stay with us for a while, but she still needs a job. Her guy hasn't got a very good job as it is, and he is being a butthead about sending her any money so far. How about it?" I had a vague memory of Jackie's sister. In school, Jackie had behind me by a few years, and Crystal had lagged her by a similar amount. Jackie, that would be a lot of driving for her. What is it, about 25 miles from your place to mine? "Yeah, but she really needs the work, Dean." "Well, I don't know. Some days I wouldn't need her but 3 hours or so. Some days I would need her some in the morning and later in the evening. Would she want to stay here all day, and if she did, would she expect to be paid for the time she was waiting on the kids? After tax and gasoline, she wouldn't make more than $5 or so on the short days. Are you sure she really wants to do the work for that?" "I don't know, Dean, but she needs something. And other days she'll probably get 12 or 14 hours when you're planting or harvesting, so things will even out, won't they?" "Yeah, but I might not even need her some days also." "Say, she has kids too, doesn't she?" Jackie gave a nod of agreement. "Well, who's going to watch?" "Oh, she'll be bringing her kids down here with her, won't she? Or are they in school yet? How will she handle that?" "Hell, that would help her right there if they aren't in school, wouldn't it? They could all eat here as part of the deal, and she wouldn't have to worry about child care." I felt at ease when Jackie informed me that the kids weren't in school yet. This could actually work out. "Tell you what, have her come visit with me and we'll see what happens," I added with a smile. After spending a few more minutes with me, Jackie departed, declared that she had to return to her patrol. Being a deputy sheriff and being able to travel the entire county without any concerns must be nice. After getting the kids on the school bus 2 days later, a dilapidated old Mustang drove into my driveway. It was burning so much that I thought I would have to give the person driving it a gallon of oil before they could get out. I saw a pale, attractive-looking young woman get out of the ancient, beat-up automobile. Inside bounced 2 small youngsters who were attempting to look outside. I was in the shop again. Wiping oil off my hands, I approached the woman. I was very certain that she was Crystal, Jackie's younger sister, because of the way she looked. I approached the woman with a smile on my face. I approached her, and she appeared uncertain and a little scared. "You must be Crystal unless I miss my guess. Jackie told me you would be coming to visit with me. I don't think I would have recognized you if I hadn't been expecting you to come out." Crystal bowed her head and offered me a hesitant grin. "Yeah, I hate to bother you like this, Dean, Mr. Thomas, but I'm really desperate. My husband doesn't send me enough money to get the kids what they need sometimes, and I just can't ask Jackie and her husband to furnish everything for us. I feel like such a worthless freeloader as it is." "First things first, Crystal. You had it right the first time. My name is Dean, and whether you work for me or not, that is what I want you to call me. Now, why don't you come on in and we'll see what we can work out." After giving me a brief glance, Crystal turned to face the children, looking terrified. "Now you two sit still and don't touch anything. I have to go talk to Mr. Thomas for a few minutes, then we'll leave," she stated as she made her way to the car door. I turned back to Crystal and stopped heading toward the house. "Well there, Missy, I didn't mean for you to leave your babies out here in the heat. Bring them on in too. It isn't right to leave kids alone in a vehicle. They can't get into anything my kids haven't been into time after time, you know." I assumed Crystal was surprised when she looked up at me. "Okay, you two, get out of the car and come with me. Now I don't want you running around and causing trouble either, you hear me?" She turned to face me and gave me a faint smile. I saw a youngster, perhaps 4 years old, jump out of the front seat. His mother made an attempt, and somewhat succeeded, to capture him beneath her arms. Feeling annoyed, he glanced up at her and said, "You help Sissy, I can do it myself, Mama." The little guy came up to me and said, "Hi mister, I'm Timmy and I'm this many. I get to go to school next year," as Crystal was assisting Sissy from the kid's seat in the middle of the tiny rear seat. "I told you to be good, Timmy. Don't disturb Mr. Thomas anymore." I was crouching in front of Timmy when I looked up to see Crystal approaching with a small princess perched on her hip. The young kid was giving me the runaround while she chewed on her finger. "Dean, as he has already told you, this is Tim, my son, and this little angel is Celeste, my daughter, but I'm afraid we call her Sissy most of the time." I said, "Hello, Sissy." Sissy smiled at me and bowed her head before attempting to conceal it in her mother's shoulder. "If it's okay with your mother, would you and your brother like some juice when we get into the kitchen?" I said. I asked for beverages as soon as my guests arrived and sat us all at the kitchen table. I distributed drinks and napkins to each person and placed a cookie jar in the middle. I discussed with Crystal what I was looking for in a babysitter and how much I could afford. She agreed to watch my kids for $35 per day, with no hourly cap, provided that she and the kids could eat dinner together every day. On the days she was here, she even consented to help me with some of the cooking and housework. She also consented to avoid driving back and forth by remaining local most of the time. Since I sometimes only needed her in the mornings and evenings during school days, that would save her money on gas. I gave her a tour of the house so she could understand where everything was. She consented to start work the following day. I was surprised to see how well Howard and Stacy got along with her and her kids. Some of the women I had in town taking care of them had caused them some discomfort. I started putting in increasingly longer hours to finish my spring planting. Approximately 1/3 of my cultivable land was planted in winter wheat, with the other 600 acres being divided between soybeans and corn. I had 300 acres set aside for hay or for my 60 brood cows to graze on. To complete my enterprise, I also kept a few hogs and hens. During the spring and fall seasons, I was most busy. I was surprised when Crystal cleaned my house from top to bottom in the first week. She had begun in the kitchen, proceeded to the restrooms, and then on to more rooms. "Crystal, I feel bad about some of the things you are doing here. I hired you to watch the kids, not to be a house cleaner. This place looks great, but I don't want you to think you have to do this too," I remarked as I sat at the table the third day she was there. "Oh," Crystal pulled her hands to her mouth and her eyes grew large. "I thought you said light cleaning could be part of my job too when I was here. I'm sorry if I upset you. I was just trying to help Dean." "I'll stop if you want me to," she said, looking upset. "I'm sorry. I won't charge you for it. I know it would be a lot to pay for all the hours I'm not watching the kids and all. I just feel like I need to do more." No, Crystal. That's not the problem. I just don't want you to make a habit of working yourself to death. Relax some. I appreciate all you've done and you do, but you don't need to be running yourself to death all day every day." Over the course of the following week, on multiple occasions, I would come home to find Crystal reading and her kids playing. Crystal would always appear guilty when I entered the house when she was sleeping and would then start working. After a while, I had a beer and went into her office, saying, "Crystal, I need to talk to you for a few minutes. Would you please come into the kitchen with me?" Before leaving, after stopping her dusting, Crystal remarked, "I'm sorry, Dean. I was just resting for a moment." With a groan, I moved toward Crystal. I took the dust cloth away from her. After guiding her to the couch, I sat down and drew her down next to me. "Crystal, have I ever mentioned that I wasn't happy with what you do around here for us?" I asked, turning to face her. She bit her lip and shook her head. "No." "Well, Crystal, if I'm not unhappy and I haven't complained to you about things and I haven't yelled at you for not doing something, then why do you always jump up when I come in and begin working again? You make me feel like an ogre, like you're scared of me or something. I've told you I don't expect you to work all the time and don't want you to do that." However, Frank insisted that a house could never be too clean, and he became irate when I was taking a nap and he came in from a long day of work. "Whoa, Crystal, right again. Do I resemble Frank? Do you think I take occasional breaks to rest? Have I ever spoken or done anything to give the impression that I was interested in your book reading or your kids' playtime? I paid you to watch my kids, damn it, and I told you it was okay to spend the day here when you weren't working. In addition, you were the one who offered to help me with some cooking and light housework." I grinned and went on, "I would consider it a favor if you could unwind a bit and be around me." All right. With a cautious smile, Crystal nodded her head in agreement. Dean, I'm not sure I can do that, but I'll try, she said. I was screwed. I unhitched the tractor and tore off for the shop and my tools, and Crystal was in the yard watching her kids play on the swing set when I came roaring into the lot. She watched as I dove off the tractor and headed for the house. Sometimes if I stayed in the house for a long time she couldn't stand it and came to do something, but she was better after that. One afternoon I had just begun working after a 10-minute stop for lunch when my damn planter broke. A wheel bearing froze, of course, stopping the wheel from turning correctly. I was leafing through my planter manual as I explained my problem to the implement dealer, and Crystal stood listening. After we cleared the first round of formalities, he checked to see if they had the parts in stock so I could make the repairs, and I told him I would be in as soon as I could. After hanging up the phone and cursing the stupid 2-hour drive there and back as well as the time I was going to lose on the repair, I felt and heard Crystal approach from behind and put her hand on my shoulder. I turned to face her, surprised and strangely comforted at the same time because this was the first time a woman had touched me in almost 3 months. Crystal said, Dean, I heard what you said to the implement dealer. If you would like, I can take a car into town and get the part for you. In this manner, you can start taking out the damaged area and perhaps resume work more quickly. It would save me at least 2 or 3 hours on the repair, so I thought, hell, why not? I can pay her for the trip and she can use my truck. I felt myself smiling and responding, sure, why not? I could see the worry in Crystal's eyes as well as a slight sense of relaxation at the slight reduction of pressure on my time. I am grateful, Crystal. That would be really beneficial. But since this is farm business, I need you to take my truck. Could you please transport it over the creek to where I work when you get back? You will be able to see the field's machinery once you have passed through the tree line. With a smile, Crystal answered, no problem, Dean. Turning back to face the kitchen door, she urged the kids to hurry up. Mr. Thomas needs us to go out for dinner. Act quickly. To enable him to return to work, we must move quickly to obtain a part for his planter. I was less than 30 minutes from breaking down and on my way back to the field to start my repairs when, much to my surprise, Crystal and the kids had their child seats moved from her old rattletrap Mustang to the rear seat of my Super Crew and were driving down my lane before I had my repair trailer hooked to the tractor. I started disassembling the planter for the repair as soon as I arrived at the field. I repaired a broken weld that I discovered. The wheel and old bearing were difficult for me to remove. The heat from the race had caused it to partially fuse to the shaft. It was only after a few minutes that I finished the disassembly that Crystal drove into view. I was nervous since I had neglected to ask her if she knew how to shift the truck into 4-wheel drive when I heard her racing through the creek. That was often necessary because to the slick rocks and steep bank going out. Upon reaching me, Crystal leaped from the truck and reached inside to retrieve the pieces. She turned and grinned at me. She was holding a large 44-ounce insulated cup filled with iced tea in one hand and a bag from the parts store in the other. She shook her head and murmured, as I grabbed for the components. You appear to be in need of a drink at this moment. You can quickly get some tea and return to your work after that. I accepted the drink with a smile, finished it in under a minute, and she handed me the bag of parts. I then started working. After a few minutes, I sensed a presence next to me and looked up to see little Tim squatting, and observing me, he said nothing. I smiled and went back to my work, but a few minutes later, I felt another shadow and looked up to see Crystal standing behind Tim and Sissy on her hip watching me as well. After working for over 2 hours without getting any response from my audience, I finally tightened the last bolt and stood up. Tim and Crystal watched me from the sidelines, and I was followed back and forth as I changed the tools in my toolbox on the repair trailer. I turned to face my audience and said, I'm going to take off down the field and see if it works okay, after telling Crystal 3 times that she didn't have to stay but that she had. She had only come back to the house once, and that was to pick up my kids when they got home from school. Could you please wait for me to return for 1 minute? If everything's okay, can you take the trailer back to the shop if I hook it up for you? She asked, nodding her head. I guess I could try, but I don't want to shatter it. I have never before pulled a trailer. Crystal, it's really simple. When I return, I'll store the truck in front of the shop. Just park it there. It'll be okay if you just move carefully through the creek. That evening, I labored through dinner and continued working until nearly midnight, by which time I had completed planting my corn and left for the house, readying the ground for the soybeans I would plant later the next day. When I arrived at the house, the living room and kitchen were nearly completely lit. I just parked the tractor in the shed with its hook still attached to the planter, started the truck, and dragged it in next to the tractor, planning to unhook everything first thing in the morning. Crystal was standing at the stove as I stepped into the kitchen. She was wearing an old t-shirt, and based on the way she moved, I didn't think anything other than her was underneath. She grinned and looked over her shoulder at me. Why don't you go clean up? Dean, when you get back, I'll have your dinner heated up. You didn't have to do this, Crystal. I apologize for working so late. I overlooked the fact that you need to return to Jackie's car via car. I just continued trying to finish since everything was going so nicely. With a smile, Crystal answered, it's nothing to worry about. If I had to go, I could have come get you. After a brief period of self-doubt, she said, "I told Jackie that you were still in the field and that I would just sleep here on the couch tonight since it is so late. If that's okay with you. I absolutely detest waking up the children and everything." "Well, Crystal, I do mind. I regret my carelessness and I don't want you to spend the night on my couch." When I noticed Crystal's shocked expression, I halted. "Oh no, I apologize, Crystal. That's not how I meant it at all. All I meant to say was that I wanted you to sleep in my guest room rather than on the couch, and I was sorry I worked so late. You can use the bed, so there's no reason why you should sleep on the sofa." "Oh, I assume you did not put your children in there." Crystal nearly muttered. "No. I put Tim in bed with Howard and Sissy in bed with Stacy as they all wanted to sleep with your two. That's all right, isn't it?" "Yeah, that's fine, Crystal." I smiled and stepped toward her before stopping. "I apologize for what I said earlier." I turned and went to clean up in my master bathroom. "It's okay if you remain here tonight, and any other nights I get wild hair and work too late again." I had not eaten since a sandwich at lunch, but when I returned to the kitchen, I found Crystal preparing one of my favorite meals: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, and whole kernel corn. It looked and tasted amazing. Of course, a 2-day-old roadkill skunk would have been good about then. Weeks passed quickly, my work was going better than it had in years, and Crystal seemed to take over the house and yard, even taking on some care for the chickens and some work around the hog pen. I lost count of the number of times she drove into town to get parts or seed or something, more assistance than any of my wives had provided, and both of them had grown up on farms. She and the kids would often stay over on the nights that I worked late. Once they started doing so frequently, I suggested that she leave some of their clothes at the house so they would have access to them if needed. I had declared July 4th a family holiday, so I decided not to work and invited Crystal, her kids, Jackie, and her husband Edward to my house for a big meal and a swim in the stream. After the meal, which consisted of fried chicken, BBQ brisket, and all the fixings, I watched the happy faces of the women for a while, taking in the laughter and giggling of the two sisters as they cleaned up, and Ed buried under a mound of children. I meandered around to the edge of the yard and sat by the stream, watching the water slowly run through the swimming hole, listening to the children laughing as they played with Ed, hearing the women giggle now and then, and occasionally hearing an explosion from a neighbor setting off a rocket. I was alone, and getting too old to have much hope of finding that nugget of gold other men had. Terry, the girl I'd grown up with, the tomboy from the next farm over, had crap on me almost from the first. We'd barely moved to the big city when she took on city ways and started going out with female friends before ending up cheating on me with one of the officers I worked with. I felt my stomach knot as my mind wandered back over my past life, and what I was hearing this hot July day felt like what I had dreamed of throughout my 3 previous marriages. And then there was gorgeous, bubbly, kind Susie, a teacher from the local school I'd met at the town cafe. God, how I'd loved that woman. She was a citified woman, but she loved life in the country, at least until she learned what a farmer's wife had to endure. Late nights, dust, dirt, greasy clothes, and missing out on weekend nights in town finally got to her. From the beginning, even though she claimed to love kids, she hated being pampered by my job and our children. Susie started to devote more time to her schoolwork and eventually offered to chaperone the cheerleaders' bus at away games. Later, I learned that she started driving herself to the games, where she and the head coach would remain in town and have a little party before heading back home. She chuckled and said, "Well, at least now I can get back to the good life," when I realized they were cheating on me and threw her out. Although I did love you once, Dean, no true lady could endure this kind of life year after year. I apologize, but I simply can't handle spending my nights on the terrace since I'm too exhausted to even consider going to bed. In the divorce, she attempted to obtain a portion of the farm's worth and was granted primary custody of the kids. When she discovered that her mother still owned the farm and everything on it, she became quite angry. I was getting paid for my labor on the farm. Susie was horrified to learn that it was somewhat less than hers and that she wouldn't even be receiving assistance. However, I was smacked very hard with the child support bill. It was not long after our divorce that I learned Susie intended to bring the kids to Japan. She had been hired by the Department of Defense school system to teach there, along with her new partner. I wouldn't let her leave the country with the kids. We ultimately went back to court, but this time I prevailed. It was forbidden for her to travel beyond the state with the kids. She then surprised me by giving me exclusive custody. I told her that I was surprised, and she said, "What you did to me and the kids isn't right, Dean. A child should be with its mother, but I can't pass up this opportunity to see some of the world because you are a selfish prig. You have the children now. You can see how hard it is to have a life and a job and take care of them for a while." She gave me a smile, gave the kids one more hug, and then she and her new guy left. It came as no surprise to me when Patty, my third wife, cheated on me. I must own that I was lonely and in need of help, but I shouldn't have married her. I disregarded her flirting and caressing with her fellow sheriff's department officers because we had a good rapport. We struck it off sufficiently to go on a date after I had met her at Jackie's, and we had a great deal in common. Before my first marriage ended and she started working as a sheriff's dispatcher, I had been a police officer for 2 years. She had grown up in Iowa on a vast farm, and we knew a few individuals in common. We used to joke around when I was a law enforcement officer, I recalled. Until the day I went to see her, I disregarded her behavior. She was driving with another deputy when I found her. She was eating his hot dog during their lunch break. I didn't have a job to lose that time, and at least he hadn't filed charges. I sat there staring across my fields, dejected and hunched over. My eyes were watering again from the damn dust and bright lights. That was something I detested. I looked around, sensing a presence close by. I could see Crystal standing 10 feet or so behind me. When she noticed my face, she scowled. She approached and settled herself next to me so she could see my face. After giving me a quick glance, she leaned in to ask, "What's wrong, Dean?" I felt her fingertips remove the water from my face before I even realized what she was doing. "Nothing. Just sitting here listening to the happy sounds and thinking." "What you thinking about?" "Oh, nothing much. Just tripping down memory lane, I suppose. The kids sound so happy and it's sort of peaceful here. I was just enjoying the day." "Yes, now tell me what's wrong." Until Crystal did something unexpected, I insisted there was nothing wrong. She pounded me with her hand and started sobbing. "Damn it, Dean, I have worked for you for 4 months now, and I have spent almost every part of that time with you. I know that something is wrong today, and I'm fairly certain that neither Jackie nor the kids nor I have caused it because you usually let us know and you don't cry when you do. Don't even try to feed me the old allergy or sunlight trick." At last, I groaned and murmured, "All right, Crystal." Perhaps I was harboring self-pity. It stings to be a damn loser like me. I was here by myself, okay. I was listening to the kids playing and laughing with Ed, and you girls were laughing in the kitchen. I recognized that I would never find or have a good woman for a wife after choosing an adulterous partner in each of my 3 marriages. I am a failure. Before I could even lift my hand to feel my scorching cheek, Crystal smacked me and yelled at me, "You damn asshole." She gazed at me in disbelief. "You are fully aware that there is nothing wrong with you. Perhaps there is, though. You're too naive to consider a woman's true nature before getting married. Then you're just too gullible." "No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is, when they violate your trust, do you feel that something is wrong with you? Holy crap, the only thing wrong with you is that you allowed your emotions lead you into something you should avoid rather than doing your homework beforehand. It's me who is having issues. What man would desire with 2 rugrats and a twice-failed woman? I am a millstone, ready to latch onto a man and pull them to the ground. They have no desire to interact with me. No man want a ready-made family that will drain him of all of his earnings. Why can't you be content with what you have if I can acknowledge it to myself and be happy? Dean, you have 2 amazing kids, a job you love, and friends who will stop at nothing to support you." "I forgot," Crystal remarked as she stood up and made her way toward the home. "Oh," she said, "I forgot," she said. "Dean, you have it all, and someday you will find the right woman if you just keep your eyes open. The kids are ready for cake and ice cream, which is why I came down here. If you can manage to remove your head from your ass and approach the home, that is." After a while of staring at Crystal as she hurried back to the house, I stood up and followed her. When I arrived in the kitchen, Ed was seated at the table, looking quizzically toward the living room. He turned to face me and exclaimed, "What the heck went on out there?" Never before have I seen Crystal so irate. I suppose I enraged her. We spoke while I was feeling sorry for myself. She might not have approved of some of what I said. At that point, Jackie returned to the kitchen, glaring at me, shaking her head and saying, "Dean, sometimes I think you're about the dumbest man on the face of the earth." With that, she turned to start chopping cake and arranging it along with ice cream and bowls for each person. The adults visited, and we sat beside the stream watching the children swim and splash in the water while the adults chatted. Every now and then we could see fireworks in the sky from nearby houses, and far off we could see the Steelville display. It was quiet while everyone ate their cake and ice cream. After that mess was cleaned up, everyone went outside again into the cooler dusk. Ed and Jackie finally decided at 10 o'clock at night that they had to go home because they had work the next day. My kids and I watched as they climbed into Ed's SUV and headed back home, where we took baths and went to bed after Crystal picked up her kids. This was just another one of those nights when I couldn't sleep, thinking about my previous life and what Crystal had said at the creek. Maybe she was right, but how could that be the case? Hell, I knew she was wrong. How could I have known Terry for nearly my entire life? I had known Susie for months before we ever started dating, and we had dated for about a year before getting married, so I believed I knew her for sure. She was a teacher, and she attended church every Sunday. Who would have imagined she would be a cheater? It's possible that Crystal was correct about Patty. Before I married her, we had only dated for 9 months, but she was from a farm and worked in law enforcement, so whatever. I assumed you knew what kind of character those occupations demanded. What went wrong with my actions? What did Crystal want me to know? I was surprised to find that when Crystal and her kids came the following morning, I was still asleep. Since all I was doing that day was making hay, I hadn't anticipated her coming so early. The dew on the grass had to be removed before I could begin, which was normally around 10 in the morning. When 4 kids crashed through the bedroom door and struck the side of the bed, boy, did I wake up pretty quickly. It was not even 7 in the morning. With a smile, Stacy responded, "Daddy, come on." While preparing breakfast, Crystal warns you to arrive quickly to avoid the cold. She is preparing your preferred omelets and even our kid-friendly pecan oatmeal waffles. Indeed, Sissy replied to Mr. Thomas, "Come on, it's time to eat." I reached for the sheet as she began to remove the covers from me. "And oh, Sissy, don't do that," I commanded. Tim and Howard both grabbed the sheet and began tugging when they noticed what she was doing. I couldn't keep up with all three because I didn't understand the content well. The sheet toppled off me and landed on the floor next to the bed. I heard footsteps in the hallway just as I leaned over to reach for it. "Hey, what's the holdup here?" remarked Crystal as she entered my room. "The food will go cold if you don't enter the kitchen immediately." Then, looking up, she halted in disbelief. I noticed her blushing as I was about to draw the duvet back over me. As it was, little Tim made everything worse. "Why is Mr. Thomas nude, Mama? Why does he sleep while you won't let me?" Crystal looked away from me, her flush deepening. "Now, you children leave Mr. Thomas's chamber. I'm confident he'll arrive soon." When I arrived in the kitchen, Crystal and Tim were having a rough time. I stood there while she explained why I wasn't wearing any clothes for sleeping. Occasionally, adults make decisions that are inappropriate for minors. I guess, Tim, since this is Mr. Thomas's home, he is free to sleep in that manner if he so chooses. You mean that now I can sleep in our house naked? That is really awesome. We can now sleep nude in our home, Sissy. No, Tim, that is not what I mean. I refer to adults occasionally. I entered the space and took a seat. I said, "Let me help with this one," Crystal, glancing at Tim. "Look, Tim, occasionally, adults decide to act in certain ways." Seeing Crystal glaring at me made me reconsider. I went on, "Well, Tim, mostly, I believe it's an adult issue, but it's also sort of a comfort and privacy thing. Adults don't have to worry about being discovered in the quiet of their own rooms when they sleep unclothed, and in certain cases, it's even better for them. I'm sure you'll learn these kinds of things as you get older, but for now, you should follow your mother's instructions because she is the one who knows what is and isn't appropriate to do. You know, there are instances when it's acceptable to do things that aren't appropriate outside of your personal space. So if I'm in my room all alone, I can be bare too. No, Tim, you must follow your mother's instruction, and occasionally an adult must visit you to make sure you're not naked in front of them. However, my mother always sees me nude. Why is she able to see me when I'm changing and in the bathtub when I'm nude and not when I'm sleeping? All right, Tim, since she needs to assist you with those tasks, but not with sleeping, you can sleep by yourself, and you should be dressed in your pajamas at that point. So it's okay for a grown-up to sleep bare because no one will see them then? Well, Tim, sort of. It's the adult's decision. If someone could insult someone else or if it's in public, they shouldn't be seen in public completely nude. You see, I was alone myself in my bed, hidden from view. There was no issue because I was appropriately covered when you kids entered and took my blankets off. That was the reason it was flawed. It seemed a bit like you were in a city and someone was attempting to strip you naked. That would not be correct, would it? Tim grinned and gave a head nod. So, Mr. Thomas, it was as if we had stripped you naked then. I'm sorry for what we did. But why can't I go to bed nude and cover up if covers are kind of like clothes? Crystal was trying really hard not to giggle while grinning at me. Okay, Tim, she finally said. That's sufficient. All you need to know is that this is Mr. Thomas's house and bedroom, and he is free to do with it as he pleases. He is free to sleep in a suit or without clothes since he is an adult. I'm your mother, and I say I don't want you to do that, so you can't. Okay, Mommy, but I sure would like to sleep bare. I stepped outside to the patio to sip my coffee after breakfast. Crystal washed up and then came out with her cup and sat on the swing next to me. I gave her a look. A smirk crossed her face. Oh, Crystal, I apologize for causing it. Tim really does have a narrow focus, doesn't he? Well, Dean is a small man, as you know, and I've never met a single one of you that isn't eager to strip off at any opportunity. Still, I appreciate your attempt to assist. After having another cup of coffee with Crystal, I determined it was dry enough to start working. Everything went smoothly, and for once, I stopped early. I was able to send the children and Crystal home early. When I ordered Crystal to move on and let me clean the kitchen, she seemed upset for some reason. It was finally time for Crystal's divorce final hearing. It had been a little more than 4 months since her spouse started to put off things. I set up my desk so that I could keep an eye on the 4 kids. While she was in court, we made plans to go shopping and get some supplies. The dealer of implements was one of my stops as I required some filters and other parts for my equipment. When I came in, the parts clerk said, "Hello, Dean," and grinned. "You haven't visited us in a long. Where is your attractive wife these days?" I think my expression conveyed the sudden, icy shock that shot through me. "Oh, touchy subject, huh?" the clerk said. "Apologies. I just become so used to her coming in for parts these days. When you come home, tell her I said hi. I'm not married anymore. It has been over a year after our divorce." "What? She's still hunting for components for you even after your divorce? How on earth did you get her to do that, man?" I was perplexed now. I was aware that Patty had never visited me for portions. When at last my mind functioned, I answered, "Oh, you mean Crystal? That's not my spouse. She just occasionally does errands for me and assists with the kids. She is attempting to file for divorce from her unfaithful spouse today at the courtroom. I apologize for the error. You must be joking, right? The way that woman speaks of you, dude. Oh my, I wish my woman had spoken as nice things about me as she has about you. What will it be today, then? That this was my last stop, I'm glad. The only thing on my mind was what old man Scoggins had mentioned at the parts counter. In any case, what had Crystal been saying about me? I returned to my house around the same time as Crystal. She had a distressed appearance when she entered the house. How was your day? I asked her, glancing at her. Is it finished? Crystal started to cry as her face fell. Yes, she replied. Not at all. The judge granted the divorce but suspended child support until the children's DNA tests were completed. That garbage is attempting to avoid paying child support by claiming that they are not his children. What made him think that? It was him who cheated. Even if I had wanted to, when did I ever have the time? Beside me, Crystal fell into the couch. I did not even consider. I took her in my arms and held her close to my chest. As all four of the kids entered the room, I was giving her gorgeous hair a gentle stroke. Sissy attempted to hug her mother and inquired as to what was wrong. Kids, your mother is depressed because your father hurt her today, I remarked. Why don't you play in your room while I comfort her and tend to her needs? Crystal tried to smile as she gazed up at me. She put her arm around me and I felt her hand brush against my chest. She spent several minutes crying in silence while she lay there. I simply held her and gave her soothing strokes. Her tears eventually stopped. I glanced down and saw that her breathing was slow and gentle. She was lying on my chest, having fallen asleep. Oh no, now what was I supposed to do? Crystal was sleeping, so I just sat and held her. After falling asleep for nearly half an hour, Crystal finally started crying and moving. Just in time, I saw her eyes open when I looked down. She took a deep breath and quickly sat up. She blushed as she gave me a shocked expression. I smiled to myself when I noticed her blouse's little indentations. Crystal, no worries. Clearly, you needed the rest, and I wasn't at all upset about it. There wasn't anything more important for me to accomplish than comfort a friend. Are you serious? In any case, thank you. I guess I best go have some food now. As it is, it will be late. After turning back to face me, Crystal headed into the kitchen. Dean, would it be okay if we stayed overnight tonight? After dinner, I really don't feel like driving to Jackie's. No issue. Crystal, it truly isn't necessary to inquire about spending the night. It's fun to have you here. In fact, I believe you should stay here on weeknights once school starts so Tim may attend kindergarten here. In this manner, you can continue working without having to arrange for him to stay at Jackie's or go pick him up each day. The school will enroll him as a resident student if we simply inform them that you live here. Dean, are you asking me to move in with you? Well, not precisely. It would be easier for you and the kids if you would just stay here. I'm not saying that you have to share a bed with me or anything. We can simply carry on as we now are. Oh, I think we can accomplish it. Would it really not bother you? We seem to be pushing you away right now, and it wouldn't be appropriate if we stayed much longer. To make up for our remaining here longer, I believe you should start paying me less. For the next 3 weeks, Crystal transferred all of her belongings and the children's stuff to my place. Jackie once assisted her once or twice, and I noticed her smirking at me. What's up with that, I wonder? Eventually, right before classes began, the results of the DNA test revealed that Frank was Crystal's children's father. The judge granted spousal maintenance but not child support. It appeared that none of the money I was giving Crystal was approved because it was nearly equal to what Frank made. But even the child support was meager. Each youngster received $25 a week from Crystal. Crystal started doing even more around the house once she moved in. She assumed total responsibility for the house, yard, and hens. She even worked in the garden during the season. She assisted me with the cattle and completed all the minor tasks related to the hog operation. I started to question how I was able to continue doing everything by myself. Every now and then I would smile and realize I hadn't been able to keep up. I was now able to take care of some of the less important repairs and even did some little remodeling on the house and outbuildings. She took a lot of time to assist me in doing that as well, and I'll be damned if she didn't. Holy crap, it was enjoyable to do. It was a joy to work with her or simply spend time with her. I purchased the 10-year-old pickup of one of the boys who lived next door who entered the service. Nothing about it bothered me, and I needed a more dependable backup car than Crystal's old junker. She complied when I asked her to accompany me in picking it up. I got her to give it a ride home. When she offered me the keys when we got it home, I declined. Crystal, no, I said. You place the extra set on the keyboard and keep the others. When you leave the site going forward, you can either drive my truck or the new one. I don't want to take the danger that someday down the road your old junker will give up. Just like a woman, damn it. After giving me a minute of intense stares, Crystal started crying and fled to her bedroom. We celebrated Christmas and Thanksgiving in my old farmhouse that fall with a large gathering. While Crystal still had a brother and her sister Jackie, I had no family in the region. We had a terrific time when they all came down with their families. The excitement and shouting of the children added to the uniqueness of the vacation. How the women could cook too, oh my. Eating their delicious food both days caused me to become ill. We even celebrated New Year's Eve with a little party. Crystal poured us each a last glass of port after our guests left, and we sat in the dark den together, watching the flickering lights on the Christmas tree. Crystal had laid her head on my shoulder, leaning against me. I encircled her shoulders with my arm. I felt her trembling as we were unwinding and savoring each other's presence. I glanced down and saw that she was sobbing quietly. "Keep silent." "What's wrong, honey?" I inquired. "Dean, what's wrong with me? Why do you always just handle me like one of the guys? How did I offend you that you don't like me?" "Dean, I'm not your typical person." Was that what transpired on the evening of my divorce proceeding? While I was still married, I could understand you not pursuing me, but what's wrong with me now? Why do you not desire me right now? I thought, crap, from where did all of this originate? Crystal, I thought we were having a terrific time together. Nothing is wrong with you. Hell, you've seen me when I let my needs get in the way, but I'm not going to treat you that way. Crystal, compared to other women I know, I like you. I absolutely adore spending as much time as I can with you, and you are a huge help here at the site. I am confident that you will do everything in your power to support me. In what way am I meant to handle you? Whoa, you might be the finest friend I've ever had. All I want is to have known you when I was younger, before everything went so wrong in my life. Compared to the 3 women I was married to, you are a far better woman. Nothing is wrong with you at all. My gut nodded, and my heart was filled with awe and accomplishment. Whoa, she wasn't really going there. Could I put myself through that again if she was? Shit, we really needed to discuss. If you're heading where I believe you are, Crystal, that may or may not be a good idea. I really did think about you in that way, but I'm not sure if I could muster the will to do it again. I always lose and I'm a loser. Crystal flinched away from me and gave me a fierce look. Damn it, Dean, are you implying that you view me as a skank, similar to the 3 people you married but were forced to divorce? Is that all there is to it? I'm not worthy of you, I'm a double divorcee. Have I not demonstrated my personality to you? I've been living with you for nearly 2 years now, damn it. Our children perceive us as a family. Hell, aside from the wedding and sharing a bed, we've been married for a very long time. You even added my name to your checking accounts, damn you, so I could purchase you stuff. Why did you do that if you didn't trust me? Do you not adore me? Is that all there is to it? Not at all. I think I do love you, but I just couldn't take that kind of pain again if we broke up, I said after taking a long breath. I simply couldn't handle that, and I couldn't subject my kids to it either. Dean, how about me? Do you not believe that I also fear getting wounded again? Do you not think that my goal is to shield my kids from the suffering that comes with being apart? Now would be a good time. Do you not believe that if we split up right now, our kids would be devastated? I'm sure it would kill you too, and it would kill me. All I'm asking for is the freedom to express my physical affection for you. If you won't marry me, well, damn you, Dean. We can simply coexist and sin together. Hell, why not? Everyone in town believes I should be doing it now anyhow. Crystal, tonight, this is the last thing on my mind. I must get some rest. I apologize. Crystal was seated on the couch, sobbing quietly, when I got up. This seemed like a really bad way to ruin a wonderful holiday season. I was probably about to lose the best thing that had ever happened to me or my kids because I had been angry with her. Shit, I had trouble falling asleep. After I went to bed, I heard Crystal clattering around in the kitchen for long until the lights eventually turned out. I gave up and got out of bed at about 4 in the morning. I ventured outside into the dimly lit home. Though I had not slept, I had occasionally been able to nod off for a short while. In 2 or 3 hours, the kids would be up and another day would begin, another year. What benefits would it offer? I sipped on another glass of Glenlivet and gazed out the rear window. When I turned to see Crystal staring at me, I heard a commotion behind me. She smiled weakly at me and said, I think I made a mistake tonight, didn't I? Would you rather that I look for another place to stay? I apologize, Dean, for what I said to you. What transpired at that moment is unknown to me. When Crystal asked if I wanted her to go, I felt afraid and empty. It was so pitiful as she stood there in the moonlight, right behind me. I was so unaware that I had moved. I took her in my arms and drew her close to me. It was actually our first meaningful kiss when we initially met. Actually, not really. In the past, we had kissed each other more as friends than anything else. This kiss was from a lover. Crystal pressed her body against mine. I stepped back and met Crystal's face directly. No, I muttered. Leaving is the last thing I want. Without you here, I would not know who I am. I doubt I could continue if you were to leave us. If you were to leave me, you would break my heart. It was just broken by the others. You would accept. We swayed. Crystal looked up at me, biting her lower lip. Her eyes gleamed. Hell, the love between them was visible to even a blind man. I had been so afraid and so blind. I was afraid, but it was a fear of making a mistake and letting this amazing person escape from me. I didn't consider what to do next. I nearly forcibly withdrew from Crystal and leaped off the bed. She appeared terrified. Dean, what is it? She trembled to ask. I said, wait, as I hurried out of her room. I nearly dashed into my bedroom, across the living room, and down the hallway. Crystal appeared next to me while I was going through some jewelry that was in a bowl in my top dresser drawer. I had hopped off her bed, and neither of us had both bothered to get dressed. It was there. Lastly, I looked across at Crystal. She was standing next to me. Crystal grinned. No, she radiated. She nodded yes and repeated the same word, pushing her left palm slightly nearer the ring I was holding. I set Crystal's mother's engagement ring on her finger. With a kiss, we turned to face my bed. I felt her carefully pull the covers over us after we were in bed. Despite herself, Crystal couldn't stop laughing. I turned to face her and gathered Timmy in an embrace. Timmy, a man and a woman sleep together when they love each other as much as your mother and I do. In order to be closer and love each other more, we sleep naked together. You youngsters should knock and ask permission before entering our bedroom, for this reason. You wouldn't want to enrage your mother by showing her your bare body, would you? If you did, it would truly hurt her feelings, and you don't want to do that, do you? Timmy gave a nod of his head. Stacy was smiling as she observed us. I'm happy that Crystal will be our new mother, she remarked. We all adore you two a great deal. When do you plan to tie the knot? With a smirk, Crystal stated, Stacy, we're not sure yet. I hope soon, but we have a lot of work to do first. The younger children had clambered onto the bed, encroaching into Crystal and me. When the phone rang, Stacy answered it. Hi there. Indeed, I'm not sure. Aunt Jackie, you might be surprised. Daddy and Crystal will tie the knot. I attempted to remove the phone from Stacy after hearing a shriek. With a step back, she responded, okay. All right, bye. She ended the call. I responded, Stacy, you shouldn't have told Aunt Jackie that. Why, Daddy? Was keeping it a secret intended? No, but your mother probably wanted to tell her the news herself. As Stacy responded, oh, I felt Crystal trembling next to me and turned to face her. I apologize, Mama. When Crystal started to cry more, I pulled her to me. I said, what's wrong, honey? Nothing, she stated, shaking her head negatively. Nothing at all. You addressed me as her mother. She addressed me as Mom. I took Crystal into my arms and sent the kids to watch cartoons in the den. She was crying herself out while I was giving her soft kisses and caresses. I heard a car door smash and gravel sliding. Then I heard footsteps stomping across the floor and our rear door blew open. I heard footsteps running toward our bedroom from the den, and then I heard voices. Jackie stormed through the door while I was watching it, her full sheriff gear on. Halfway to the bed, she stopped and peered at me holding her sister. Crystal leaned very close to me. It's about time, you stupid person. I must admit that I was growing weary of hearing Crystal whine and whine about you ignoring her. I was going to shoot you to end her suffering. Jackie remarked, perching on the edge of the bed. Now, please tell me everything in a rush. I need to return to patrol. How did you manage to break Crystal with that massive, stupid lug? Jackie, could you maybe just go into the den for a minute or two? I asked her as I turned to face her. I have to make some coffee and get dressed. It doesn't appear that I will be sleeping for a while. Jackie got up and walked out of the room. Just as I was getting out of bed, she popped her head back in. I'll make the coffee, but you hurry. Jackie, Crystal let out a scream. All I did was turn and run for my clothes in the bathroom. Well, on Valentine's Day, we tied the knot. With the exception of Crystal sleeping with me, we continued to work and live as before and showed each other physical and emotional love. Crystal approached me late that autumn and revealed to me that we would be having a kid. We planned to have our own as soon as possible because I had promised her one, and we were both rather old. Crystal is crying. The little one began kindergarten today. She feels elderly because her baby began school. I dragged her toward the house along the driveway. Honey, consider it. This place is kid-free. For 1 or 2 days, the job is caught up. Whatever our plans are for ourselves, Crystal halted and drew me toward her. I'm not sure. However, I'm sure I can come up with something. She gave me a little backward glance before turning to face me. She reached up to cup my cheek and said, in a whisper, oh, Dean, I love you so much. Yes, in the game of life, I did face 3 strikes, but I struck out on my next at bat. It needed the support of 2 very exceptional women for me to wake up and learn how to distinguish between substance and fluff. My comment, I know a female who is on her 3rd husband. Thing is, she has been into double digits as far as her adulterous relationships go for over a decade. You know someone like this in your life? Comment down below, sub and bell, and I will catch you in the next one.